CityCast Pittsburgh is coming to you today, care of the Pittsburgh Opera, presenting Puccini's enduring tale of love and heartbreak, Madama Butterfly. The final performances are this Friday and Sunday, and you can experience the tragic love story of Cho-Cho-san and Lieutenant Pinkerton like never before. The images that the opera is sharing from this show, they are so vibrant and beautiful. And of course, it is all paired with Puccini's stunning music. Don't miss out. Catch the show this weekend before it's gone. Learn more at pittsburghopera.org/citycast. Pittsburgh Opera, where can we take you?
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, the pirates are back. The county has advice about roadkill, and one of Pennsylvania's most scandalous judges is tangentially back in the news because of a 19th century proto-robot. I'm with CityCast Sophia Lowe and Mallory Falk talking about the biggest stories of the week. It's Friday, March 28th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I am bundled under a blanket talking to Mallory and Sophia. Y'all, my heart and mind have not been prepared for a return to all this cold and snowy weather this week.
Me neither.
Fall spring will get you every time.
It really does.
And it's supposed to be warm this weekend, but still raining, so boo.
Reminder to everyone listening to us, we are still doing trivia, but it'll be before our first ad break now. Woohoo! So let's jump right into the news. Last week, y'all had kind of a bleak show. Sophia and Mallory gave everyone a hell of an update about huge problems with PRT and with HUD. Can y'all catch everybody up in case they missed last week's show?
Yeah, so for PRT, we are in danger of losing up to 41 bus lines if state funding doesn't come through. A whole bunch of other things like no buses after 11 p.m. And just like a lot of changes to routes. But, you know, that's all still very up in the air.
Yeah, I think the thing that was the most striking to me listening to the show, it's fun to listen to the show, was that not only are so many going away, but also almost all of them are going to change in some way. Like it just really touches every part of the system.
Mm-hmm. And that there are going to be some neighborhoods and some like areas around Pittsburgh that just straight up aren't going to have public transit at all anymore.
Huge loss.
It's really hard to wrap your head around.
And then in terms of the HUD field office in Pittsburgh, that could also go away because of Trump administration cuts. Mayor Allegheny and Rep. Summer Lee held a press conference about it, talking about how it's really important to make sure there's still like affordable housing, renter protections. But, you know, that is also up in the air.
Because that office does so much enforcement around those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that as the backdrop, this week, Allegheny County Executive Sara Innamorato gave her quarterly address to County Council. I didn't realize this. Apparently, it's in our county charter that you are required to do this every quarter. If I ever heard one from Rich Fitzgerald, I don't remember it. I did check in on this.
Innamorato's predecessor, yeah.
Yeah, I did check in, and apparently his was a 10-minute recitation of a lot of numbers, like number of streets that were plowed and bathrooms that were checked on, like things like that. Very repeatable, somewhat easy to do.
Listen, there have been issues with the bathrooms in the city-county building, so I would want to know how many have been checked in on.
Honestly,
that's important data.
There were actually toilet updates in this one, too, so there's something for everybody. A lot of excitement about flushable toilets. There was a lot to say.
That's important.
As opposed to what?
Clogged ones?
Well, no, I think like in parks and stuff, like sometimes it's the pit toilet, you know?
Got it.
Starting off strong with the Pittsburgh potty talk. Anyway, I did not know what to expect from this. I am still somewhat new to watching council meetings for the city and for the county. It was sort of entertaining. Also, a lot of the stories that I read kind of going into this, like what triggered my curiosity in the first place, were very bleak. Like, you know, a lot of doom and gloom, a lot of funding cuts. Like this is the county's scared. But then I actually listened to the presentation. Y'all, it is extremely positive.
Really?
There's so much good news. Yeah. It's like the very end of it, like 4 or 5 minutes of her presentation, which was well over half an hour, are talking about those challenges and kind of what their plan of attack is right now. But the whole front of it was nothing but good stuff.
So what are we doing well?
Yeah. So do y'all want the good news or the bad news first?
Good.
Good. Okay. So we'll start with the Parks Department since toilets are top of mind. Boyce Park, that's the one where we have like kind of a beginner ski slope. It's like a really fun, family-friendly way to like learn how to ski or snowboard. They, of course, had a banner year because we had all that snow. That's really fun. And they also are getting a toilet by the new climbing wall. I haven't checked it out yet, but I really want to.
Yeah. I think a toilet is going to be good for that space. Besides toilets, what is on the up and up?
Yes. So something to look forward to. Heartwood Acres is bringing back Wine Fest. Tickets are available now.
I did not realize the county was in charge of Wine Fest or involved in it in any way.
Yes, I love it. I mean, it actually stands to reason to me, like how involved the Commonwealth is and how we drink. Like, of course, the county's going to get involved in a wine festival.
That's a good point.
That's going to be July 19th, but tickets went on sale this week. Construction has started for the South Park pickleball courts. They are also getting a toilet by the playground. So good news for all the toddler parents out there.
Yes. Okay.
And then they're also going to be reopening the Armstrong Tunnel this summer. So that's the artery kind of by like, I guess, under Duquesne University, by the hospitals and like that leads to downtown or downtown to the south side. So that's going to be nice to have back online.
Okay, this all sounds really nice, but like a couple new toilets, a wine fest. I'm curious about anything else that like might really have an impact day to day on people's lives.
I mean, I think part of the joy, air quotes, of government is that if it all goes well, you don't have to think about it that deeply.
Yeah.
Some small hits. So like the elections division, they're unveiling the sticker. That's going to be part of our primary in May 20th. So if you participated in the special election this past week, we'll talk more about that later. This would be the last election that you will not get our new Yinzerfied sticker, the I voted sticker. So that's coming. They're also hiring, by the way, for election poll workers. They've hired 4,000 people so far. They need 3,000 more.
Whoa. So just over halfway there. That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. It's also usually pretty well paying. You go for training and then you actually do the day of the election.
Right.
In our health division, our health department, they have been working, of course, on COVID stuff forever. They're now working on bird flu. And their big advice for right now is, for the love of God, please don't touch any dead birds. That if you see dead birds anywhere, call the health department, call DPW, call 311. Like, don't try to deal with that yourself right now, not with bird flu going around.
I mean,
totally fair.
I don't know that I needed a county official to tell me that. But
apparently you do.
My cat needs someone to tell her that.
They're working on measles vaccines right now and making sure that anybody who wants one can get a booster. There are no cases reported in the county anywhere right now, so that's great news. In case you were wondering, 117 fish fries received their permits this season. So that's quite a lot over the whole county.
I always forget just like the hyper specificity of who needs a permit for
I
what.
know. For sure. In our DHS, that's our housing department, they gave a 500 and 500 update. Of course, that's being affected by our federal cuts. But they said there are more than 233 units that are online now, so not quite halfway. As part of that, they've gotten space for 369 people that have used those units so far.
And just a reminder, 500 and 500, that's Sara Innamorato's plan to get 500 units online for our unhoused community members.
Yeah. Over at the jail, she gave a positive jail update, Jens.
That is so rare.
I know. The new warden has started. They said they're working on an Animal Friends project to bring dogs over to the jail. And they're doing volunteer thank yous right now. They're also celebrating Ramadan and doing Catholic Holy Week. So there's a bunch of events around that. And then in the economic development space, do y'all remember that fire that happened at Clairton Coke Works on Christmas Eve? Like, it was a big deal. There were lawsuits and everything, and U.S. Steel had to pay out for that. Well, they paid the county, and so they've distributed a bunch of grants. There's a new round of grants starting soon. So as soon as we get the details on those, we'll make sure that they're in our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. The other thing I thought was worthwhile is that the groundbreaking for the new Arts Landing downtown, that's happening on Wednesday, and Governor Josh Shapiro is going to be in town for it.
Fancy. Well, I mean, we hit a lot of good news, but I do want to know what's bad, especially because, you teed this whole thing up with PRT and HUD, and like, I rely on the bus a lot. Like, what's the county gonna do?
You'd rather have a functional bus line than a cute sticker at the polls.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I will have to say no to the sticker if I had to choose between the two.
I don't think it's an either or proposition. My impression of listening to a lot of council meetings over the last few months is that we want to still provide small bits of joy where we can, even if it means pinching pennies in other places.
Yes, I didn't mean to be negative about the stickers. I'm very excited. I've lived places that have fun, fancy stickers, so I'm a big fan, not knocking them at all.
Yeah, shout out to Molly at Mount Lebanon. You really did the work with the sticker. But yeah, the bad news all has to do with what's gone or what's in jeopardy now because of, what Sara Innamorato called federal chaos and the new budget package that, for example, Senator John Fetterman voted for as recently as this month.
Mm-hmm.
So the specifics, County Executive Sara Innamorato said that they're going to be lobbying the state for more money in a variety of places. So for senior care, for health care at the Allegheny County Jail, and of course, Pittsburgh Regional Transit. But this is Sara Innamorato talking to County Council this week.
Anything that happens at the state level still pales in comparison to the absolute recklessness and chaos at the federal government since the new administration has taken office in January. And while we have spent so much time together, we spent a lot of time together getting together a county budget that works for the people all last fall. We did not talk a lot about the grants and special account budget. Ultimately, the state and federal government decide what they provide to us or not, and that's reflected in that account specifically. So, of course, we were dismayed when the Trump administration began announcing freezes and cuts. It has been a chaotic few months, and every day the list of potentially impacted projects changes. It's things like infrastructure and EV charging stations, Medicaid, housing, NIH grants, refugee resettlement money. It's just a few of the pots of money that we've been tracking, but we know there's many more that impact our region's economy.
Yeah, it's tough. We talked a lot on the show about all the work that she and the county councilors put into getting this tax increase passed to try to get the funding to ensure that our essential services keep running in the county. And then to have this whole layer beyond that you don't have control over is really challenging, I would imagine.
Yeah, and to the Medicaid point specifically, she said that if that goes away, that would be devastating for Arcane's senior care system, that it'll be, quote, money we have to make up or cuts we have to make, end quote. And they can't not provide that to some extent, as far as I understand it. So that would be like a really, really, really expensive thing to suddenly have to swallow into the budget. Here she is again talking to council.
Recently, you may have read that the budget deal, known as the Continuing Resolution, or CR, that passed through Congress, it kept the federal government operating until September, but it did cut all of the congressionally directed spending, which is commonly known as earmarks. And that included millions of dollars for Allegheny County. There was $3 million for the 500 and 500 initiative that was coming directly to the county. There was money for a new workforce training center in Rankin. There were enhancements for transit and pedestrian safety along PA Route 837 and flood mitigation in Turtle Creek. All of that is gone now. My administration is committed to governing with compassion and competency in the face of all of this chaos. And we will be transparent with council if and when federal cuts and freezes are going to significantly impact our budget or our shared agenda.
So all of that is bleak as hell. They also talked a little bit more about Pittsburgh Regional Transit. Innamorato says that they are working on a shared narrative. I assume she means the county, the transit authority, and others probably to try to lobby as one to the state government for what PRT says it needs. She also noted in there that transit is part of why people move to a city, and it is basically required if you want to try to grow at all,
Absolutely.
Which is something every candidate for mayor right right now is talking about. She's been talking about. The governor's been talking about it. And we just had those census numbers drop. Like, if we want to grow, we cannot cut our entire transit system.
By drop, you mean got released. We actually grew,
yes.
but like by 0.001%.
Yeah, it was teeny tiny.
Not a lot of growth.
Yeah, it comes out to under 500 people.
Yeah, the record dropped. That's what I meant. But yeah, that's what council spent a few more minutes talking about. And I mean, also just like heart for all of our neighbors that are now hearing this news and like, you now have to live without any form of transit in your neighborhood at all. Good luck.
Well, hopefully they have like a really strong united front and a good plan for like making the case for state money so that the situation isn't quite as dire.
Yeah, Pittsburghers for Public Transit is always working on making our transit systems better, and they actually already have like a form up to help contact your representatives. So we'll have that link in our show notes as well. But I want to do what the county's doing, bad news, but also dropping in those moments of joy. Trivia time.
Trivia
time.
Sophia. So we're going to focus. It's the end of Women's History Month. So to celebrate, our trivia this week is all famous Pittsburghers, female Pittsburghers. We'll focus on just one of them today. So North Sider, Lois Weber, was the very first woman to break through a pretty male-dominated field in her day. What field was that? Do y'all know?
Absolutely not. Give me some choices, please.
Choices: magazine publishing, film directing, book editing, or newspaper writing. We'll have the answer after the break.
Today's episode is supported by History Unerased, a provider of LGBTQ inclusive curriculums. How would your life have changed if you'd learned about influential LGBTQ figures in school? History Unerased helps teachers tell a more complete story of our nation's history. They say they're the country's leading group when it comes to bringing LGBTQ history into schools, something that's really important at a time when LGBTQ rights are under attack. And you can support this work by showing up to Yins Can't Erase Us. History Unerased is hosting an afternoon of community and celebration on Saturday, April 5th at 5801 in Point Breeze. The party will include food, drinks, music, trivia, and a giveaway, plus an appearance from Danny Roberts from the New Orleans season of MTV's The Real World. Get your tickets on their website, it's unerased.org, and then click on the supporters tab to buy your ticket and contribute to a more inclusive future for us all.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
So I'm going to take a guess at our trivia question and guess that Lois Weber broke through film directing. A lot of our other answers were like journalism-ish, and I hope that I would have heard about her.
if she was a local journalist.
Yeah, maybe.
So I actually already know the answer to this one. Sophia, you are right. Lois Weber broke into the film directing industry. In 1916, she was actually, for a minute, Hollywood's highest paid director, like male or female.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Made over 200 films.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of them addressing like really like, I don't know, spicy topics at the time, like capital punishment, poverty, birth control. And this is again at the turn of the 20th century. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah. And the reason I knew the answer is because we actually have a really great profile of Lois Weber up on our website, pittsburgh.citycast.fm. I helped edit it, so I did know the answer this week, but I would highly encourage you to check it out to learn more about her because she's a really fascinating woman and a woman that we as Pittsburghers can take a lot of pride in that legacy.
So in a manner of speaking, we're going to keep things a little bit historical. Presidential pardons have been back in the news recently. I don't know if y'all have been following this, but I feel like it's made the rounds on some of the like news comedy channels lately. President Donald Trump contends that none of President Biden's 8,000 pardons should be counted because Biden seemingly, at least at some point, used a device called an autopen.
So I haven't been following this super closely. I've seen the headlines and stuff. I don't actually know what an autopen is. I'm going to guess. Is it like one of those things like an Adobe Acrobat when it can save your signature instead of like actually writing it out? It kind of becomes like a stamp.
Sort of, actually. That's a pretty good comparison, although that is the very modern comparison. So the fascinating thing to me is that autopen, like as a concept, is a thing that goes back to literally Thomas Jefferson.
Is that just the literal stamp version then?
No, it wasn't a stamp.
Okay.
Actually, back in his day, the first known one, they called it a polygraph at the time. Now, we know polygraph to mean something else now. But in his case, it was a pen that was like, I've looked at pictures of this thing, that had another pen like out to the side. So as he wrote one letter, it directly copied the exact same letter over. So it was still very manual. The way they work today and for the last several decades is they're like kind of the size of a printer. They can print like in a way that looks still like handwriting, the exact signature of, you know, an official or whatever who does not have the ability, like the time to sit there and handwrite their signature all over the place.
So I'm guessing Trump has not used this if he's calling Biden out for it.
Incorrect. You would be incorrect.
That's weird.
President Donald Trump, as far as we know, as reporting suggests, that he has in fact used it before. Trump contends on his own social media network, Truth Social, that because Biden allegedly used it on a pardon, that's not real. He also suggested that like Biden didn't even know that this was happening, that like I think this is part of that narrative that like Biden wasn't like mentally in the room when he was doing things, which has been debunked over and over again. President Biden talked about these pardons over and over and over again, talked about signing them. Like, I don't think that this is like a realistic way to talk about this. There's some really good reporting. There's an NPR article in particular that I will link in the show notes. It's great if you want to learn more about the autopen and how presidents have used it over the years.
Okay, I will check this out later because I love stationery.
Perfect for you
going
then.
back to like the pardons, how does this relate to like us, Allegheny County, Pittsburgh, all that?
Yeah, so all of this is important to us and to our listeners, I think, because of who received one of Biden's pardons. This was the batch that he released right before he left office just a few months ago. Michael Conahan. Mallory, you might want to take it from here, actually, because I am familiar with the details of this case, but the actual events, like, long predate my time in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so this judge, he was involved in the Kids for Cash scandal, one of two judges who were involved in it. This happened in the early aughts, like between 2003 and 2008. And essentially, it's what it sounds like. There were these two judges, Michael Conahan and Mike Chiavarella, who set up this scheme where they would send kids to for-profit jails and then get financial kickbacks.
That is so messed up.
Yeah, Sophia's face is really rocking with this in real time. It's terrible, right?
It's extremely terrible. And like the more details you learn, the worse it gets. So these judges, they shut down a county-run juvenile detention center, and then they got almost $3 million in illegal payments from a friend of Conahan's who built and co-owned for-profit facilities. These judges were based in Luzerne County, but one of the facilities was in Butler County, and that's kind of the local connection here.
Yeah, just north of Pittsburgh.
And like, as you might expect, they had incentive to send away as many kids as possible.
And we should say this was like during the zero tolerance era, too, where you could get in trouble for basically anything and they just call it zero tolerance in your school. And then you suddenly had some automatic punishment. Like, I remember I got zero toleranced for chewing gum once in my school in Tennessee. And
what was the consequence?
3 days of suspension for chewing gum in class.
I mean, Megan, when you hear what happened to these kids, you're going to think you got off very easy.
Oh, no, this is not a comparison. It's just, it was a weird era to be a child in school.
Yeah, these like hyper highly controlled environments. But yeah, I mean, the kind of things that some of these kids were sent away for were not far off from chewing gum. They got sent to detention facilities for things including smoking on school grounds, jaywalking.
What?
I heard a really phenomenal episode of this podcast, Crime Show, all about this that I highly recommend listening to. The girl they featured, she was sent to a detention facility because she made a MySpace page making fun of her vice principal.
Come on, that's like part of the sport of being in school and being an adult, frankly. Like, if you're in a position of power, you have to be ready to be made fun of. That's just part of it.
Yeah. She actually was one of the people who kind of helped unravel this whole scandal. So again, like definitely listen to hear how it all went down and the way young people really advocated for themselves. But yeah, these judges sent kids away for really minor offenses. For many of them, it was like the first time they'd gotten in trouble. But then a lot of them ended up like on this really challenging path because once you're in that system, it's really hard to get out.
Even if it's in a juvenile system, which in many cases gets expunged when you become a legal adult, like it still means that people will look at you a different way, that your teachers in school don't give you the same credit. Like there's just so many ways that can affect your academic career and your own mental health, your confidence level. Like, oh, it's so upsetting to think about.
Yeah, so this kind of all got uncovered in 2009. Chivarella got sentenced to 28 years and Conahan got sentenced to 17 years. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court ended up throwing out about 4,000 juvenile convictions that involved more than 2,300 kids, just to give you a sense of like how far-reaching this whole thing was. And then we actually talked about this whole case on the show a couple of years ago because there was a civil court ruling ordering these judges to pay $200 million to hundreds of their victims. Like it was largely a symbolic ruling. No one expects that money is actually going to go to the victims, but it was just another mark of how horrific this was.
Wait, if money's not going to the victims, where's it going?
Well, usually it's just that like the person who like that ruling happens to, like they'll declare bankruptcy, like because they often don't necessarily have it, or they've moved their money, their assets into other places so that it looks like they can't pay it. There's a lot of ways to get out of or not actually end up paying out.
Okay.
On a macro level, the opioid crisis, for example, and how that money has to come like trickle down over time.
Right. Okay. That makes sense to me. Why did Biden pardon one of these judges?
Great question.
Yeah. And I was curious, too, because I thought kind of like, why one and not the other? What's the deal here? There were two guys involved.
Why one at all?
Well, yes. I mean, most importantly, why one at all? But basically, so Conahan, back in 2020, I don't know if you guys remember this, where like some people were being released from jail at the height of the pandemic to kind of try to stop the spread of COVID, because in those like small locked facilities, it could spread really quickly.
Yeah.
So Conahan was one of the people who was released. He has been on home confinement since 2020, and Biden took a list of people who had been on home confinement and he pardoned them. And so that's why Conahan ended up on this pardon list. Obviously, a lot of people were not happy, including our own governor, Josh Shapiro. At the time, he said, "I do feel strongly that President Biden got it absolutely wrong and created a lot of pain here in northeastern Pennsylvania." One of the most heartbreaking testimonies from the time was this mother whose son got caught up in this scheme and ended up dying by suicide later, just talking about like what a slap in the face this was. So people were really, really upset when they saw this man's name on that list.
And you can't undo it either. Like, I mean, that's part of this conversation with Trump bringing this up and making a whole fuss about autopen being used or not being used. Like, there is no provision in the U.S. Constitution to undo a pardon. And there's actually no provision that even says a pardon has to be written down. So like whether an autopen was used or not, it doesn't really matter. That's not how pardons work. There's wide, like broad clemency power for the executive branch. Like the only requirement is that the person who gets the pardon has to acknowledge that they've accepted it. That's it. And then it's a done deal.
Well, one side note in all of this that I thought was interesting when I was trying to find that answer of like, why did this guy get pardoned? A lot of reporting linked to statements from the White House from the time when Biden first granted these pardons. When I clicked those links, they are now 404 pages at whitehouse.gov. So a little piece of history that has since disappeared, I guess, since been wiped.
This episode is brought to you by the Nissan Armada Pro 4X. With a twin-turbo V6 engine ready to propel your adventures, up to 8,500 pounds of towing capacity to haul all your favorite toys, and space for 8 passengers, Nissan's most powerful car yet will chew up and spit out anything you throw at it. Learn more about the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada at nissanusa.com. Towing capacity varies by configuration. See Nissan Towing Guide and Owner's Manual for additional information. Always secure cargo.
Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse April 3rd, only on Netflix.
So here's what else you need to know this week. Mostly a bunch of updates. We'll start with the special election that happened on Tuesday. There were 2 of them. One happened over here in Western Pennsylvania and one across the state. So here in Western PA, the 35th District elected Democrat Dan Gogenauer from McKeesport. That kept the Democratic majority in the PA House. It is a
very thin majority.
It is a razor thin majority. It is 102 to 101. And that seat, of course, had to be filled after former Representative Matt Gurgley died pretty young back in January. That other election was in Lancaster County. Another Democrat was voted into office. It was a Senate race. A pretty big deal because Lancaster is a very red county.
Yeah, I think it was like plus 15 for Trump.
Yeah. So important move for Democrats if you're watching that race, but the Senate is so strongly Republican that it doesn't really make a big difference to the state Senate.
Right, still a Republican majority. So my update is a little longer than the special elections because it gets into development.
Spicy.
Always, yes, a very spicy topic in Pittsburgh. So it's an update on a building we've talked about before, Donnie's Place. A group of Pittsburghers submitted the building for historic designation, and that got in front of the City Planning Commission this week. They voted against giving the building the designation.
Yeah, unanimously, right? It was like a pretty strong vote against.
Yeah, everyone there voted no. Donnie's Place was a queer bar in Polish Hill. It was open from 1972 to 2022. It was also a spot where people could get resources and support during the AIDS epidemic.
And if you're much newer here, you didn't see it during its prime. The space right now, it's like pretty unassuming. You would not realize that some of this historic stuff had happened in there. It's kind of this brick building with fire damage and graffiti. It doesn't look like a landmark at this moment in time.
Yeah, I've only seen it in that form. It does not look important. It looks very much abandoned. It was owned by Donald Thinnis. He died last year, and he wanted that area to become more residential. And the Thinnis estate made a deal with a developer to sell the property. But then some community members and Polish Hill residents got wind of this and then filed that historic nomination.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like everyone who was in favor of the bar becoming a historic designation, they obviously talked about how it was an important piece of local queer history. Bill O'Driscoll at WESA has done some great reporting on this. But there's also this concern that it was maybe a ploy to prevent development there.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been reading so much about that as a tactic lately as it relates to zoning and kind of this push and pull between YIMBY and NIMBY. So yes in my backyard, no in my backyard. Definitely not a scholar of zoning history, laws, or anything like that. But since Pittsburgh's just been talking so much about this and our specific challenges and successes, I've been trying to learn more. And this keeps coming up, like people throwing out like, hey, this is a historic space, which changes so much what can happen in a space.
And I mean, Polish Hill right now is a neighborhood where there is a lot of conversation around building more multi-unit residential buildings like near public transit. And in fact, we talked on the show about a city planning commission meeting where so many people came to talk about that piece of the proposal, to talk about what could happen to Polish Hill, that they had to kind of table everything else on the agenda because people felt so passionate about this. So this is a neighborhood where there's a lot of conversation right now about the future of housing, the future of development, and what it's going to look like.
We'll also link a public source article about this whole back and forth about Donnie's Place if you want to read more about those different perspectives. A lot of people who knew Donnie came out and said that he would not have cared about this historic designation. And that was something the City Planning Commission took into consideration. So like you said, Mallory, everyone present voted against the historic designation. But it does go to City Council for a final decision. To get that historic designation, City Council would need 6 out of 9 votes. TBD when they'll vote, but it does need to happen within 120 days.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on to some news that I think will be universally celebrated. The potholes at Pittsburgh Mills are finally getting filled.
That's
Yay!
wonderful news. My father's going to be so happy.
Yeah, if you haven't been out there, these potholes are very treacherous. The Trib reported that there were 2 pothole incidents so bad that the car's crash system notifications went off.
Oh my gosh.
And emergency responders actually headed over to, I guess, the Pittsburgh Mills parking lot because they thought there was a crash.
And the owner of the property, I think it's Namdar Realty, they own the mall, which means that they own the property around it. And I mean, if you've been up there anytime recently, you know that mall is not in the greatest shape, but everything around it is actually doing pretty good. So like the parking lot being a problem is not just a product of a dead mall. It really affects how people use that space. And the township has been complaining about it for a while, but being like, we can't do it. It's privately owned property. We have to have help to fix this.
And Namdar Realty, that owner, has a history of letting their properties get in really bad shape.
It sounds like they might not get off the hook this time because the Fraser Police and the district attorney's office in our county started a criminal investigation. And they actually found that the money these businesses were paying Namdar to go to pothole repair, they were not, in fact, going to pothole repair. Unfortunately,
I mean, shocking. Like, look at the parking lot. I'm not the least bit surprised. The photos of that place are wild.
Unfortunately, the Trib didn't say where it was going. Like, I always just imagine, I don't know, diamond jewels for a mistress, that's where money goes when it's not accounted for. Who knows? But a paving contractor has confirmed that they are working on the property now. So work is underway. Your next trip might not be as horrible. You might leave with like your car and your tires intact.
Well, we'll keep the good news rolling, at least for my tiny piece of this. A few things here that we're looking forward to. So mine is Pirates games. The season started this week as we were recording this. I am in my Pirates t-shirt. I dressed my child in a Pirates jersey today. Home opener, of course, is next weekend. You're going to hear more about that from us in the coming days. But anyway, it is the most hopeful part of our baseball season. And you can't beat a warm, sunny day in the ballpark, even if the Buccos are terrible. Like this is our time to shine, or it will be in like a month when it's nicer outside.
And at least you can always get some snacks.
So my update is about schools and specifically the decision about whether to close any public schools in Pittsburgh because the final call on that got delayed again.
This has been dragging out so long.
So the school board was supposed to vote this week on whether or not to start a public hearing process, which is something that's required by the state before you close schools. A reminder, the current proposal is to close 10 Pittsburgh public school buildings. But, families have been saying that this feels rushed, and board members themselves, some of them said they need more data. So the district is going to push back the vote. The final vote on closures was supposed to happen in August. Now that is delayed until at least September. But until this public hearing period gets voted on and kicked off, we won't actually know when that final vote is coming.
We're going to move on to another piece. There is a rally planned for next week against UPMC. So this is news that's popped just as we've been preparing to talk today. But there have been reports that our major health systems for the last few weeks have been denying folks gender-affirming care.
This is so infuriating to read. I am so mad about this.
Yeah, props to the Pitt News. That's the student newspaper at the University of Pittsburgh. They don't have a journalism program. These kids just do this on their own. Disclosure, I serve on the Pitt News advisory board with some of these students, and I'm so proud of them. That story was really focused on the effects for trans kids. But I know I've seen this in my feed too. Well, Allegheny has now posted about it, saying that he's ready to fight, and there will be a rally downtown at UPMC headquarters that'll be next Thursday at 5:30 p.m. I'm so glad that someone has taken to task an organization that is doing this, but also very separately and very low down on the priority list, I have to imagine that this does not help Mayor Gainey's case in getting UPMC to sign a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. I want him to fight, but I also it's in the back of my head that this has got to hurt that cause.
I know Gainey says he's gotten close to getting them to sign that agreement, but at the end of the day, he hasn't. So I would rather him be super loud about making sure that kids are safe, because gender affirming care is life-saving. It's necessary. I want all these things for our kids, and I don't want something to happen for trans adults where they also can't access care. I know that's less of a big topic that's up for debate, but I think it's going to come soon.
I mean, I feel like that's kind of the message in so many realms right now is this is starting to come for some people, and it's going to come for many more if we don't pay attention and do something about it right now.
Yeah,
exactly. And we'll keep on watching and seeing if UPMC ends up saying anything, because right now I haven't seen them come out and say, we have stopped this care, or like, no, this care is still happening.
Right.
But, one more time, the bad news, but also the good news. The city and county are both getting ready to open pools for the summer.
Yes, ending on a happy note.
Yes, always. WESA reports that the city pools are supposed to open on June 16th. County pools TBD. That's still a few months away, so we'll keep our eyes out for, that official announcement.
Mm-hmm. And also, like, how many pools are going to be open this time? I can't believe we have to play this game every year.
Yeah, the number of pools for the city is still TBD. That depends on how many lifeguards we have. We do know that Homewood Pool is going to be closed, though, because of renovations that are happening in the park.
Same as last summer.
Mm-hmm. But they are hiring lifeguards, so if you want all of the other pools to be open, tell your friends, tell your teenagers. Lifeguards must be at least 15 years old. If you're planning on working for a city pool, you need to live in the city of Pittsburgh. And you also have to be willing to work at any pool. You won't automatically get assigned to one that's in your neighborhood.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's a little, I think, harder sometimes for teenagers who maybe can't drive yet. But I mean, if we had a functioning bus system, this wouldn't be a problem.
I'm telling you.
And I know you're mentioning teenagers, Sophia, but I've heard some really heartwarming stories about retirees who are also kind of like, I have some time on my hands this summer. I want to be out in the world and social and sign up to become lifeguards. So you don't just have to be a high schooler to do this. This can be like a really nice thing for anybody who has some time on their hands and is looking to make a little money.
Well, if you're interested, the starting rate for the city's lifeguards is $17.48, much higher than minimum wage. And it got slightly bumped up from last year when it was just under $17. The county is also hiring for their pools. Same thing in terms of age, 15 and up for lifeguard positions. The county's hourly salary is $16 to $18.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. Our music is by Benji, All the Kimonos, and Cosmo Keys, with additional music from epidemicsound.com. Mallory Falk is our executive producer. Sophia Lowe produces the show. Francesca DeBecco writes our newsletter. Kevin Gavin is our trivia master. And I am your host, Megan Harris. We will be back on Monday with more news from around the city. Have a great week, Indians. The climbers, for example, now don't have to, pee or poop in the woods, which is a thing when they go outside to climb. Not that they would do that at a county park.